What's up guys, it's Chris here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to balance a knockoff Glidecam. What I use is a Sutefoto camera stabilizer. This is essentially a knockoff Glidecam for about $60, and this thing has absolutely been amazing. This has worked for every camera I've used, even after I upgraded to my Sigma 18-35. This thing has still been trucking along with it, just had to add more weights to the bottom, and everything just worked just fine. This is essentially this exact same thing that the newer stabilizers, the Sutefotos, and a couple of the other off-brand ones. Now today I'm going to show you guys how to balance this thing because there's literally no documentation online of how to do this, and it was quite annoying to figure this out myself. So let's get right into it. The entire way this thing gets balanced is by having an equal weight down here as it is to the camera up here. Now as it stands right now, you can see it's not even close to being level or anything like that. It's all over the place, a little too wobbly. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to do the drop test. This needs to be about 2 seconds drop to 1, 2, is a little longer than 2 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to extend this out, give it a little more weight down here to make it more balanced towards the bottom. So 1, 2, about 1.5, 2 seconds, somewhere in there. I prefer having around 1.5 seconds, but with that being said, you can see how it's still unbalanced and everything like that. You spin it around, it just wobbles around like a top, and that's not good. So holding it steady and straight like this, you'll see it's leaning to the left and back a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the knobs, and we're going to slide it to the left and see if we can't get it somewhat more balanced. Try to get it more centered into how it's supposed to sit. All right, and after we have it moved over a little bit, we notice that it's now offset to the back side a little more. So we're going to correct it going the other way, and it's all about micro adjustments at this point. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to slowly spin it to see if you can't figure out which direction it needs to be turned a little more. So like this one right here, whenever you spin it, it tilts backwards ever so slightly. So you're going to want to tilt it forward, and just like that, it's balanced. So now if you actually shoot with it and you do this, it stays centered. Every little subtle change you do to this thing for balance does affect this. Like, oh snap, you left the lens cap on. You have to take that off, you have to rebalance it now. Just drop that. You didn't extend the lens to your right focal length, you balanced it wrong. You have to redo it all again. The point here is you want to try to make sure that you know your camera and know your stabilizer so you know exactly how you need to do it. A mistake a lot of people do is they try to throw their 50mm lens on here, they try to throw their 30mm lens on here, and it just doesn't work. I'm not even kidding whenever I say you need a wide lens for this, because if you have a 50mm lens on here, say you're using a crop sensor, that's now a 75mm lens equivalent, and you're just shaking like crazy. Use a 35, that makes it maybe a 50-ish, and it's still shaking like crazy. Less noticeable, but still. Whenever you have a 10mm lens on there, a 15mm lens, it makes it an actual 30, makes it a wide angle lens. There's still shake, you can still notice a little shake, but it's very, very little, and it's mostly controlled by the stabilizer. And at that point, you can throw some warp stabilizer, some stabilization in there, and it makes it work all the same. Now, something a lot of people don't actually realize when it comes to using these things, you can't just one-hand it and it's gonna keep it all completely balanced. The best way to do this, use 1 or 2 fingers and hold onto it towards the grip that you have. About right here, just underneath it. This is how I usually do it. I usually have about all 4 fingers just so I can keep it on there. And that's how you control the rotation. While you're walking around, you don't want it trying to sway this way or sway towards you. You want to hold on to it and make sure that you keep it straight with the way you're going. Not enough that you stop it from moving, just enough that you can direct it ever so slightly. And if you start swaying more that way, you didn't balance it right. What I have is I have my Lumix, I have my speed booster, and I have a Sigma 18-35. Now that makes it around a 25mm lens, and that works perfectly for it. The weight is another thing that's a problem. I have to extend this all the way, have to put more weight on here than it came with, but it works just the same. Instead of me having to upgrade to a $300-400 Glidecam, which I really should do, I don't have to because this thing is putting in the extra work for me. This was $60, and I've used it on literally every wedding I've ever worked on. My short film Paradoxical, that very last end scene in the church, that was on this. I didn't have time to stabilize it, that's why it's a little shaky, but mistakes were made and we learned from them. That's the point here, is that all these things are just learned, and this thing, there's no documentation online of how to use it, so hopefully this helps you guys out. And with that being said, I love you all, and click that subscribe button if you want to see more. Click that bell icon to get notified of all my videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.